and good evening. This is Scotland at 7 on Broadcasting Scotland. I'm Andrew Wilson. This is the first time that I've been asked to do this, so with a fair wind and fingers crossed, everything will go to plan this evening. I should say, first of all, we're all wishing Gordon the very best of luck with his hospital treatment that is due next week, and he's in our thoughts at the moment, so we hope that Gordon gets well soon. I'm joined this evening by Julie Coombe. Julie is an actress and writer based in Edinburgh, who's been a guest on Scotland at 7 many times in the past. Julie, how are you keeping this evening?
I am fine, thank you. As you know, I had my vaccine not so long ago, but I'm through that, through the other side now, so I'm fine. Nice to
Very
see
good.
you.
And you too. How was your Easter weekend?
It was actually quite sedate due to the AstraZeneca um, eider down that was thrown onto my weekend. But no, it was really nice actually. And speaking to friends who managed, we sort of socially distanced meetups with family and friends. And we live near Lauriston Castle in Edinburgh, and we went for a wee walk in there, and there were loads of kids doing Easter egg hunts and everything. So it was all very lovely and spring like. And then the snow came.
It
How
wouldn't
was
be Scotland
yours?
if the weather didn't change.
No.
We had a very peaceful weekend as well. It was lovely. Thank you. I should maybe start first of all this evening with the coronavirus update. Uh, as of 2 p.m. this afternoon, a total of 1,843,048 people in Scotland have been tested through the NHS Scotland labs and the UK government regional testing centres since the start of the pandemic. Of these, 1,622,555 have been confirmed negative, 220,493 have tested positive, and there are 259 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. The 14-day moving average of cases today fell to 436, the lowest 14-day average since the 29th of September last year. Not everyone with the virus will display symptoms, and not all those with symptoms will be tested. There were no new reported deaths of people who have tested positive today. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus COVID-19 infection now stands at 7,614. This number only includes those who have died having received a positive test in the previous 28 days. Of the people who have tested positive, 196 were in hospital last night, 21 of whom were in intensive care. As of 8 a.m. today, 2,577,816 people had received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccination, and 463,780 had received their second dose. Finally, the latest UK daily figures show 126,882 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, and that's an increase of 20 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings, not just in hospitals. Now, Julie, you touched on, when we came into the programme there, you touched on that you've now been vaccinated. I was vaccinated yesterday. What was the impression that you formed from the vaccination process?
Um, I went down to get my vaccine, and I basically had my choice of booths. And actually, I tweeted about it after I had my vaccine, because I was chatting to the nurses there, and they were saying that some days, they said every day is different, because I said, are you just busy, busy, busy? Or some days there's a steady trickle of people, but a lot of, quite a few days, well, a lot of days, unfortunately, they have a lot of no-shows. So I tweeted about that, because I thought, who wouldn't turn up? You and I both had the side effects, and they're not nice, but as we both said, it's much preferable to catching COVID. Who wouldn't, go and get this vaccine? But then somebody else tweeted and said, oh, there's been letters haven't been sent out. So there's always, there's always two sides to every story, and then there's the truth. But I couldn't believe that they were saying some days we're sitting around twiddling our thumbs. But I was just delighted to get the vaccine. And I think I was a wee bit too excited and a wee bit too gallus, and thought I wasn't going to get any side effects, but I did. But like I say, I'm through them now.
That's the most important thing. And as you say, if we're making progress, those numbers of vaccinations that I just read out show that we are making very good progress with this.
Yeah.
And we'll touch on the vaccination program again later. The vaccination program again later on in the program as we go through this evening. I'll turn first of all to the first story for this evening, which is in the Scottish election. The SNP will keep dignity, fairness, and respect at the heart of social security. In a press statement released this afternoon, the SNP said that dignity, fairness and respect will remain at the heart of Scotland's social security system. The SNP leader Nicola Sturgeon pledged today as she outlined new measures to support carers and to help tackle fuel poverty. The SNP has already unveiled a raft of policies designed to tackle poverty and improved opportunities, including a doubling of the Scottish Child Payment, providing every pupil with their own laptop or device and an internet connection if required, extending free bus travel to everyone under 22, and action to increase community empowerment and ensure more wealth stays in local communities. Scotland's new social security system is now paying out 10 benefits, 7 of them brand new and not available elsewhere in the UK. With 30 days to go until the election, Ms Sturgeon outlined further key measures to be introduced in the next term by a re-elected SNP government, and they included awarding a double payment of carers allowance supplement this year worth £460 in recognition of the extra burden the pandemic has placed upon the carers. They will also introduce an improved carers assistance payment to replace carers allowance. It will pay a further £10 per week to those who are caring for more than one disabled person, and increase the period of paying the benefit when a carer loses someone they have cared for from 8 weeks to 12 weeks. It will replace the current UK winter fuel payment with a winter heating payment for older people, maintaining its current rates and not means testing it, helping around 1 million households and backed by around £180 million a year. In addition, the cold weather payment, which is unreliable and can pay out infrequently, will be replaced with a new stable annual £50 winter heating payment to those low-income households currently eligible for cold weather payments. This £20 million investment will benefit around 400,000 households. So, Julie, you mentioned that over the weekend we were enjoying Scottish weather, which is from minute to minute, bright sunshine and then snowing, and temperatures moving in the same way at the same time. And I think in the statement there, talking about the unreliability of cold weather payments in Scotland, where the weather is so unpredictable. It strikes me that you touched on the matter already, but in that statement and in that package of announcements, can you see any themes or anything that jumps out at you in particular?
Well, I spoke on a previous programme about the SNP's pledges for towards social care in the coming election, and I was on with Siobhan Tolland that night, and I'm so pleased that they're calling it social security, Andrew, rather than benefits, because that's always grated with me, and I think there is a softer, kinder, more humane aspect to all of this. It does seem to be aimed at making life a bit better for people that maybe don't have as much. And in my book, that's necessary and good, and very, very welcome. And I just think that I don't think there's any other party that would be pledging as much. I'm sure people will tweet and tell me that I'm wrong, but I just don't think that there is. I don't think that the sort of welfare of a nation is as much on the other party's minds. Certainly not from the things that I'm getting through my door, which is, election leaflets. So I think it pleases me, these pledges, whether they come to fruition, whether they all come to fruition or they partially come to fruition will have to be seen. But I think it is a fairly caring government that would make these pledges.
I think you're absolutely right there. And as we know, presentation matters, and making people both in terms of those who are receiving payments such as these, and also the rest of our society, that people understand and that it's presented to them in a way that is fair and is
Yeah.
sensible and respectful. I think you absolutely get that. I was just
Mm-hmm.
reflecting there. This is another time that another package of change of manifesto proposals that we've seen from the SNP, and I was
Mm-hmm.
minded. This may sound a little bit strange, but I was minded immediately of high performance sport techniques. Now, bear with me on this one. The point is that in order to make a 10% improvement in somebody, you make 10 improvements of 1% each.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't
Mm-hmm.
focus on one single thing and make a big change in that. You change all sorts of things across a range of aspects, and thereby improve in that case the athlete, but improve things for the person by 10% by changing a number of things. And I was just wondering if this is a reflection of an approach that we're seeing from the SNP in terms of making
Uh-huh.
positive changes, but across a whole range of areas that will affect people's lives.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really interesting, you know, sort of strand that you've picked up there, Andrew. It's a bit like that when, even in my business in acting, if you want to change something about somebody's performance, quite often you don't go, and, a director oughtn't to focus on changing one monumental thing. It's sort of working in increments, and sometimes has to other things, change things that they're doing, um, make things easier for a person. And I think that, if you focus on one thing, there are inevitably other things are going to go by the wayside and just be forgotten about or fall through this sieve. And I think it, little by little, is quite sensible, and then hopefully you'll get more changes, more positive changes, rather than, because if you have one massive change, it's going to please some people a lot, and it's not going to please all of the people. You won't please all of the people, but I think this approach is to try and improve things for many more people than others, shall we say, than other parties would. So it remains to be seen. But at the moment, all I'm getting through my door is how to stop another independence referendum, from the other parties. So that's it. It's not really what we're going to do or it's just massive how to stop another independence referendum. And I think, well, I don't really know what you want. I know what you don't want. But I'm glad to hear that this is how the SNP would like to progress.
Absolutely, you were making the point there about it being a range of affecting a range of different people or a range of different ways, and certainly it strikes me that in this package, or this statement this afternoon, the SNP have identified activities to improve the lives of young people, be it those still in education with the guaranteed provision of hardware, which I know is
Yeah,
something that's computer hardware, which I know is something that's been has been patchy during during
yeah.
2020, and extending free bus travel to everyone under 22. And then at the same time, there are benefits here for those who are providing care, either to those who are disabled or, of course, caring often for more senior members of families. And there's winter payments, winter heating payments here, which often are attracted by low income households or older households as well.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
it's an interesting that you're reflecting that this is, as you say, this is not just focused on one one part of our society or one group in our society. It seems to be across all demographics.
Yeah, I mean, no matter what you do, you'll attract criticism. But if you do sort of specify one group, then they will attract all of the criticism from all of the groups who are not, not included in it. And I'm interested in the free bus travel because my son, when he went on his Erasmus year, he was in Germany, and yeah, there was free travel because he was a student. He was in Leipzig. We went over to Berlin to visit our other son who was doing a language course there, and I said, "Oh, yeah, are you going to come up and see us, or will we come and see you?" Thinking he's skint, poor student. And he went, "No, I'll just nip up on the bus, and it's free and makes a huge difference." And actually, we're seeing around Edinburgh all the new bus lanes and things like that. I think that will make a big difference to people using public transport. And we need to start that. We need to stop taking cars into the centre of the city. And so it's good,
And
interesting.
absolutely, and encouraging young people, well, making it even easier for young people. I suppose there's a perspective there insofar as bus travel is free for older members of our community,
Yeah, yeah,
and now it's being reflected as being provided for younger members of our society. So that there's maybe a balance in there.
yeah.
We'll be talking about young people, and the next story this evening is more focused on education. Uh,
Mm,
the Scottish Greens are set to unveil proposals to teach the past to Scottish school pupils through a decolonised account of the UK's history of empire and slavery, as well as new efforts to teach the future through embedding education about the climate crisis across the curriculum for excellence. The policies, included in the party's upcoming election manifesto, come in response to demands from young people across the country, including the Teach the Future group of school climate strikers. These young activists behind Teach the Future had voiced their frustration that they have not been told the truth about the extent of the climate crisis or how it can be solved. And following the Black Lives Matter protests in the summer of 2020 and the toppling of a statue of slave trader Edward Colston in Bristol, many young people, as well as charities, campaign groups, and community organisations representing people of colour, have highlighted the low levels of awareness in Scotland of the country's historic involvement in the slave trade and British Empire. This has led to renewed calls to decolonise the school curriculum, teaching an accurate and honest account of the country's historic complicity in the crime of slavery and giving appropriate weight to the experience and perspectives of people of colour. So, Julie, there are two aspects there, nicely contrasted in terms of teaching the past and teaching the future in this proposed manifesto announcement from the Scottish Greens. Uh,
mm.
do those both strike you strongly, or does one resonate more strongly with you than the other?
Well, we're very climate change focused in this house, I'm afraid. So, not I'm afraid. In fact, I'm proud of it, and I think that the more education that young people get on that, and actually not just education, a sort of change in the way that we think and the way that we behave. Um, it has to happen. There's certain, Greta Thunberg and all the protests, they've now happened. That genie can't be put back in the bottle. In the same way that the Black Lives Matters movement came to the fore through tragedy, unfortunately, through terrible things that happened in America and other things that have happened historically, and continue to happen on a daily basis. I've worked quite closely with when I was doing some work with Equity, the Actors Union, with my friend who was involved in all the diversity and equality, and it's tough, the whole racism and equality thing. It's a really tough situation, on a day to day basis, and people just don't know. We don't know. I kept saying we need to be educated to get the white people in that room. There's no point in having all the people of colour in there. But I think that's what's happened, Andrew, is that these things have come to the fore. They're not going to go away now, and it's a good thing that they're not going to go away now. We need to teach history in a different way. We need to teach it in a warts and all way. And I don't know how my friend and we had a big long conversation about whether you should take the slave people that had involvement in the slave trade, the street names down and all that. And she said, no, I don't think so, because then I think you're hiding, the involvement, and I can see the validity in that as well. But I can see why people would be offended to have something named after someone who'd made all their money and basically benefited from this awful misery. And I think that we need to start looking at these things. We need to start being honest. And our history has been coloured with, in a colonial way, not as much as people of colour, But it has been, we've just been used, that narrative has been forced on people, and it's time for a change, and it's time for people to grow up and accept it and learn from it.
I think that I completely agree. The position of, well, I think we know in Bristol that a number of institutions have taken the name Colston out of their name. I think
Mm-hmm.
one of the theatres has changed its name,
Yeah.
Colston's is perhaps a good example, as I understand it. He wasn't really recognised as an upstanding leading member of the community in Bristol until long after his death.
Yes.
It suited the Victorians to put up a statue to him, even though nobody thought that was the right thing to do when he was alive.
Yeah.
So and again, we said earlier on that presentation matters. I
Yes.
suppose. Well, we know in Edinburgh there is now the text of the sign that is proposed to be put at the foot of the Henry Dundas column in St Andrew's Square.
Yeah.
The council, I think, have discussed and have agreed, I think, the text of that sign. And we in this household too had the same debate. Do you whitewash is the wrong word, but
Yeah.
do you hide, as you say, do you sweep away the past? I would often say that means you risk not learning from the past if you hide it, or
Mm,
do you confront it and educate? I'm
mm,
certainly struck, and it's not all about statues, but presentation matters. I'm certainly struck by the number of the statues in George Square to get away from Edinburgh. The number of
yes.
statues in George Square who were closely involved either in imperial adventures. There are a number of
Mm,
generals on plinths in George Square, so either involved in imperial adventures or
mm,
involved in making the slave trade work and profiting from it. The better or greater clarity and greater education around about the merchant city in Glasgow and the tobacco barons would in a sense would match the recognition that in the east of the country, Henry Dundas delayed the end of slavery by 20 years,
eh,
and his role is pretty clear too. So it's, but I think it is interesting here to be thinking and listening to young people in terms of what is important to them
mhm.
in their aspirations for education. Certainly, on a range of topics, it's obvious to me. There are a couple of young people in this house or household, and it's very clear to me that they think about things in a their priorities are different and their perspectives are different, and that I think there's a risk that if we don't listen and reflect their priorities, then we risk either marginalising them or not giving due weight to what's important to them. We're approaching an election in Scotland where everyone over the age of 16 gets to vote.
Mm,
There's certainly a strong argument, I think, that in terms of the voters have a say in terms of the educational curriculum in the country that they're voting in and going to school in at the same time.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think for a long time, the history teaching in school has been dominated by the First and Second World War and um, kind of British conflicts and that, shall we say? And I think we were okay with that. And I mean, I don't think you're as old as me, but I think we were fine with that because our parents were very defined by the Second World War, the First World War, but actually, my sons, I consider them to be intelligent, well-educated people. My oldest son's a Cambridge graduate. My youngest son's just finishing up at Newcastle, and I'm appalled that at some of the things they don't know. And they go, "Why is that so important?" And I think actually, yeah, you need to start listening to them because the things that are important to them are slightly different to the things that are important to us. There's a collective responsibility, collective conscience, but yeah, like you say, start listening to them because these are the people who are going to vote the direction of the country. So
Yep,
it's quite
I think
important.
absolutely right. I suppose your point's absolutely right. Climate change was not on the agenda when you and I were growing up, and it's definitely
I
on the
see.
agenda.
It seemed like we were kind of hell bent on destroying the climate actually when we were growing up. It was
Yeah,
all about convenience and, just throw it away. Oh no, that's dirty. Oh, you can have that. I mean, I used to work in a fruit shop when I was at school. Got my fiver on a
mhm.
Saturday and saved up, and then got all my had my eye on something, got it after a few weeks. And I used to have to put the fruit and all that in the brown paper bags. And I just thought this was so low rent. Why weren't people just coming in and buying a punnet of things or, in a fabulous plastic container? And now I'm like, oh no, get the brown paper bags.
Yes, yes. Yes, that we're waking up to it finally is probably a good thing. Definitely a good thing. But yes, and so I think as you say, people's backgrounds are often influenced by their parents or their parents' experience. But
Mm,
the world moves on, and in terms of priorities and the approach to things, and the prioritization of events, climate obviously is hugely important to young. So, it's important to all of us. It's particularly important to young people who are going to inherit what you and I leave behind, and
yes.
the and in thinking in terms of promoting an inclusive and well-educated country by teaching both the past and the future. I can see that
Mm,
that would be that there are attractions in that to a lot of people.
mhm.
Uh, Moving on to the next story, it's also focused on young people, but not entirely. The Scottish Labour today outlined plans to get their plans to get the unemployed back to work after the pandemic. The party's proposed new scheme will be open to long-term unemployed over 25 and all jobless under 25s, and to all disabled people who do not have jobs. The Jobs for Recovery Guarantee will include 6 months of training and employment opportunities across public, private and voluntary sectors, with applicants being matched to local opportunities ranging from care and construction to administration and grounds maintenance. Scottish leader Scottish Labour leader Anas Sarwar said the policy was part of a £1.2 billion economic recovery plan, which would include the biggest job creation scheme in the history of devolution. So, Julie, a slightly more focused approach there from Scottish Labour with their announcement today. Uh, what does anything jump out at you from that announcement from Scottish Labour?
Um, I don't know where he's going to get all that money from, but it'd be interesting to see if he does. I feel, and I don't know enough about it actually to make a very erudite comment, but it feels to me like there's going to be some sort of fancy acronym on a scheme, and there's going to be some sexy branding on it, but that is eventually going to end up an insult. That you were a yopper and all these kind of things. Remember that far back? And I don't know. It sounds good. It sounds like it looks marvelous on paper, but I'm just not sure where they're going to get all the money to do it. Um, you know.
Yes, to me, it does sound a wee bit speculative to me. In the run up to the pandemic, now, without talking about the quality of the jobs that there were, and
Uh,
that's a whole bigger and wider and more important and more serious issue. What is a job? But this is we don't yet know the impact that the pandemic is going to have on unemployment. I think nobody would disagree that there is going to be increased unemployment,
yeah,
especially if there's a long tail of impact on the travel sector and a range of other industries, of course. Uh,
yeah.
but the but this strikes me as being a bit speculative as to putting a big number of pounds on it, and talking about a jobs for recovery guarantee, and it comes back to my point about what is a job, the drive through austerity, and with which the Labour Party at Westminster certainly didn't do very much to oppose.
No.
The devaluing of jobs and the rise of the 0 hours culture, and the growth both in Scotland and the UK and in other Western countries, that whereas maybe 30, 40 years ago you could support a household on one wage, or a
Yeah.
wage and a half, now you need two wages or more. an average household. It strikes me that these would have to be jobs that actually offered something to people, not
Yeah,
not not just a limited period of time, and not just limited security, and not just limited income as well. There needs to be something concrete, if that's the right word in this, to me.
yeah. It sounds like it could become something that people are forced to do, or lose social security. It sounds like it could be something that's used negatively, if you know what I mean. And I just, as you say, the quality of the jobs is incredibly important. Um, and I just think it sounds to me like somebody who's a new leader of the party, and knows fine well all the things that Scottish Labour have been accused of in the past. That they're the wishy-washy, and there's been no sort of direction, and he's come up with this amazing new scheme, and it's all marvelous, and we're going to have no unemployed people at all. But I just don't know how it will work. I just don't know how can he get that much money? How can he do it?
So it's fair to say there's a degree of healthy scepticism around this
Yeah.
announcement. It's a good point that you make, though, with the leader of the Labour Party in Westminster reaching the first anniversary of his elevation, and of course we're in the early weeks of Anna Sarwar becoming leader.
Mm-hmm.
One wonders if we're going to see more coordination and collaboration between those two, whereas there maybe
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a great deal of collaboration between Sir Keir Starmer and Richard Leonard. Perhaps I think they were maybe a little opposed. It may be something to watch in terms of a more coherent approach. Although I suppose that then risks, if it's an approach that's being driven from Westminster, then there's a risk that it may not address the priorities of the people in Scotland. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, and he is very. I mean, Sarwar is a committed unionist, isn't he?
Oh yeah.
He's made no. Yeah, he. So I think that, to my mind, that will absolutely be his intention, is to have this marvelous pact with Westminster. Bring him up.
Well,
Well, I'm not going to say Faustian pact.
it's certainly caused me to stop and reflect a little bit with an extremely successful lawyer, knighted lawyer, leading the Labour Party in Westminster, and the dentist, son of a millionaire businessman, running the Labour Party in Scotland. I do wonder the extent to which they've shared experience with their constituency.
Yes, I think we may well we're going to be talking about Mr. Starmer later on, aren't we? About something, and
Yeah.
I think just slightly out of touch. I never
Yes.
thought I thought in my lifetime there would ever be a sir leading the Labour Party. There's also a sir in charge of the Lib Dems. I mean, I don't know what it's about, actually. I feel like I've been beamed here from outer space.
I think that's very fair. We were talking about you were talking about committed unionists. So if we turn
Mhm.
that on its head for a moment and talk
Oh,
about a committed independence campaigner,
mhm.
this afternoon at his campaign launch today, Alex Salmond, in his declaration for Scotland, said that negotiations over Scottish independence should begin in week one of the next Holyrood term if there is a pro-independence supermajority. While his definition of a supermajority remains unclear, Mr Salmond said he thought it possible that there would be more than 80 pro-independence MSPs elected on May the 6th. So, Julie, the ongoing evolution of Mr. Salmond's political career continues. What's your takeaway from events this week so far this week?
Well, I know whenever we speak about Mr. Salmond, we're going to be divisive, but I, I, I don't really understand it, Andrew. I don't. I mean, I am pro indie, and that's fine, and I have got friends who are not and all that. But I think regardless of what had happened with Alex Salmond, if we do go all the way to get independence, I think would always have been regarded as the father of independence because he took us such a long way. I worry that this will jeopardise his place in that. If I'm being kind to him, when I'm not being kind to him, I say, what is this vanity trip that's going on, and why are you endangering the thing that we've been working for all these years. I think to discuss week one, an independence referendum, I think that will go down like a cup of cold sick in Westminster. Hello, Boris, don't even take your coat off, but we're having the talk. Um, I, I just feel, I honestly, I don't know. I'm kind of disenchanted of Davidson's mains at the moment. I really am.
I completely understand where you're coming from. I think that Mr. Salmond seems to be speaking to a very small part
Mm,
of the independence movement,
mm,
and I'm not convinced personally that he is expanding the size of the independence movement.
no,
It does seem very, very focused. But by the same token, there is no question, as you say, that Mr. Salmond has been an extremely adept politician throughout his career and was successful in negotiating the Edinburgh Agreement and in getting us to a referendum in 2014.
yeah,
But plenty of water has gone under the bridge since 2014, including support from independents rising apparently in the polls above 50%. So it is curious that we find ourselves at this stage just now. I suppose we may hear more in terms of his plans and policies over the next 30 days as we get to the 6th of May. But I think there's certainly more meat to be put onto the bones of what it is that he's proposing, and
definitely.
that may persuade more people to support, or we'll see where it gets to. Okay,
Yeah,
we'll move on again. We'll come back to young people because they've been an important topic that we've touched on throughout the programme this evening, and they continue to be so. And that, of course, is the announcement today from the First Minister that schools will return full time. Nearly all pupils will return to full time school when the Easter holidays end. However, children who are on the shielding list are advised to stay at home until 26 April, in line with advice from the Chief Medical Officer. All other pupils will return to school once the summer term starts. Strict 2-metre physical distancing between pupils in secondary schools will be removed, and schools will consider how they can strengthen other mitigations. Following a national expansion of lateral flow testing, twice-weekly tests are available for all school staff in primary, secondary and special schools, and for secondary school pupils. So, Julie, the approach to education has been evolving over the last couple of weeks. My partner has started her twice weekly flow testing and loves it. But she's doing it because she has to, and she understands
yeah,
why. And I suppose we've had today also from the First Minister the announcement of a move to providing twice weekly lateral flow testing for for the whole population
hmm
very soon. But in terms of focusing on education, what has anything struck you from the announcements today that schools will return full time from the end of the Easter holidays?
Well, I think we'd been kind of expecting it, hadn't we? That's what had been fed. Certainly, it's what I've been picking up from all my friends who are teachers on Twitter and all that. But I know that a lot of them aren't best pleased about how it's been handled. I think it. I think we need the normality of the kids to be back at school. It must be very odd for them and for teachers. I've got friends who are teachers, friends who work in nurseries, and they've been doing all the testing. I mean, I have to say, I worry about the environment with the testing and all these good things. It's a huge amount of money, but I think whether they're playing around with figures, it doesn't seem to have caused a huge upsurge in cases. And I think if young people can get back to an education, because they've missed so much. I mean, and I'm saying this from my kids are finished. My youngest boy is just finishing his degree just now, and that has been a really odd final year. I have to say, I can't imagine what it'd been like if I'd had them both over at Royal High at the moment. Um, so I don't know. I understand why the teachers feel a little bit nervy about it. They should be getting prioritised with vaccine. I think. I mean, even though we've both had the horrible side effects and all that, I think they should be getting prioritised. Vaccinate the teachers just now when they're on holiday, um, and that should make a big difference. So, but
I,
I
I,
don't.
I think that's very fair. I think we've seen certainly, well, obviously, teachers who are our age have had their first vaccination now.
Yes,
Uh,
yeah,
I, all the teachers I know who are our age have had that, obviously, but certainly I know that the EIS are continuing to express concern about the level of precautions that will be
yeah.
provided, and to take a precautionary approach for staff,
Mm.
and obviously the pupils as well, but for staff. I think my own impression is that a degree of measured approach to this is necessary. I've certainly heard stories of parents greeting each other at schools that have been holding holiday events and holiday camps over the last 2 or 3 weeks, and so just the whole community holding together and continuing to apply a degree of common sense to this unlocking, to this return to a little bit of more normality for our young people. But I completely agree that both the impact has been huge on them, and
Mm.
also I've been so impressed by the way in which young people have handled the events of the pandemic. I am absolutely confident that if I had been that age in a pandemic, I would either have been sectioned or jailed or both. So that young people have coped so well is a real testament, in my mind, to their resilience and their resolve to do the best that they can as we
Yeah.
get through this. But we've touched on vaccinations a couple of times, and of course today the First Minister Nicola Sturgeon announced that the first batch of a newly approved Moderna vaccine has arrived in Scotland. Scotland will receive more than 1 million of the 17 million doses of the Moderna vaccine procured by the UK government. The First Minister said that the doses have already been factored into forward planning for the vaccination programme and will be delivered over the coming months. She also confirmed the Scottish Government is planning to expand its testing programme to ensure that everyone in Scotland can be offered a lateral flow test at least twice a week. So that nicely wraps up, Julie, a couple of the points that we've been touching on round about testing and the ongoing approach to the vaccination programme that we're seeing. Apart from perhaps adding in some different classes of employees, teachers, for example, are there any other changes or adjustments that have crossed your mind that we might think about making to the programme?
Well, I did wonder when that nurse said to me about, and this is pure me spitballing here. When the nurse said to me about no shows, I wondered if there could be a sort of standby system. How difficult, how much of an admin job would that be? Because I know that, my oldest son is with us at the moment, and I know that if he got a phone call and they said, "Do you want to come and get a vaccine?" he would run down and get it. He would be there in jig time. Um, I think they do. I think they are. I have to say, even the UK government, they've never really got much good to say about. I think we're doing a really good job of the vaccine, getting the programme out. But I've got a friend who's a policeman, and he said that they're not being prioritised. And I think they should have prioritised the people who are having to deal with the consequences of the pandemic. He popped round because I had a question that I needed to ask him. And he was standing at the door with his mask on, and he said, "Right, oh, is that fine, Julie? I need to go. That's the calls. That's the evening COVID party calls coming in." And they're having to deal with that. So to my mind, they should have been getting vaccinated. Frontline people should have been getting vaccinated first off. And I think policemen and teachers are frontline in my book.
I think that's a good point. We have seen a degree of some narrow frontline prioritisation for care workers and health workers. It's maybe a time where we think about expanding that, as you say, to address more frontline workers. And I think certainly we might see a little bit more of that. I know the First Minister commented today on the events in the Meadows in Edinburgh over the weekend, with thousands of young people being cleared, having to be cleared away. And the First Minister's point, as I remember it, was that the frontline staff, like the police, shouldn't be having to deal with this at the moment.
Yeah.
If we were still holding together as a community, and of course you and I both understand that young people have been locked down and locked in for a year now, and are desperate to get outside and to see their friends and to get some degree of normality back. But as you say, to be putting frontline workers such as police officers in that difficult position seems unnecessary at this moment in time, and just a little bit more time and a little bit more thought might not go amiss. Anyway, let me move on. We touched on this story a little bit very briefly earlier on in the programme, and the Labour leader at Westminster, Sir Keir Starmer, has apologised for visiting a North London church that has faced criticism for homophobia. Starmer said he disagreed with the views espoused by the leaders of the Jesus House in Brent, which hosts a vaccination centre, but which has also been accused of carrying out exorcisms on gay people, adding that he only learned of the concerns after his visit on Good Friday. The Labour leader posted a video of his visit to his Twitter account, provoking severe criticism from LGBTQ+ Labour supporters who demanded a public apology. Starmer said, "I completely disagree with Jesus House's beliefs on LGBT+ rights, which I was not aware of before my visit. I apologise for the hurt my visit caused and have taken down the video. It was a mistake, and I accept that." So, Julie, it's a curious thing that that any political leader, but that a political leader of the Labour Party would stumble into an unnecessary, unforced error like this.
I mean, honestly, you watch something like The Thick of It, and you think that, it's a comedy programme and they're making it all up, but maybe not. I cannot believe that someone of Keir Starmer's intelligence would not insist on the research, or if the research hasn't been done, that's a massive failure, or if the research has been done, he hasn't read it, and that's an even more massive failure. Why put yourself in the position of having to remove a video and make an apology when it's absolutely unnecessary? We're just, absolutely unnecessary, reading the tiniest bit of information, and just don't hurt people like that, don't insult people like that. Do your job properly. And actually, he's got researchers coming out of his ears, and they're not, people's time is a little bit their own at the moment because they're not in work and everything. I mean, I think it's to his credit that he apologises. That's not something that politicians find easy, but I just can't believe that it happened.
So I completely agree. An unforced error. The next story we have, Julie, this evening relates to Harvey Weinstein, who has asked a New York State Appeals Court to throw out his conviction for sexual assault and rape and to grant a new trial, saying that the trial judge made several errors that denied Weinstein an impartial jury. Weinstein, 69, was sentenced in March 2020 by Justice James Burke of Manhattan Criminal Court to 23 years in prison for assaulting former production assistant Mimi Haley and raping former aspiring actress Jessica Mann. Weinstein claimed that these were consensual sexual encounters. His conviction was a watershed moment for the Me Too movement against sexual abuse and harassment. His lawyers also argue that he was denied a presumption of innocence when Burke allowed the jury to hear testimony from 3 women who alleged that Weinstein assaulted them, even though their accusations did not result in a criminal charge. The 3 women described for the jury what prosecutors characterised as Weinstein's signature pattern of behaviour, luring women to hotel rooms or his apartment to discuss film roles then attacking them. Weinstein's lawyers had asked Burke during the trial to bar 2 of the 3 women from testifying. Jurors were instructed that the 3 women's testimony could only be used as evidence of Weinstein's intent, not propensity, to commit sexual assault. Weinstein said that the third-degree rape charge should be dismissed because the alleged misconduct occurred too long ago, and a new trial should concern a single count of first-degree criminal sexual act. Even if his conviction were overturned, Weinstein still faces charges, including forcible rape in Los Angeles, involving 5 alleged victims from 2004 to 2013. Weinstein faces up to 140 years in prison if convicted in those trials. And the final story we have this evening, Julie, brings us back a little closer to home, and it's a topic that's been all across the news for the last 2 or 3 weeks, but we have news from Egypt, and that the Suez Canal Authority is considering expanding the southern section of the waterway where the container ship Evergreen became stranded, the chairman of the Suez Canal Authority said today. The authority is also looking at procuring cranes that could potentially offload cargo at heights of up to 52 metres, Osama Raby confirmed, adding, "Our procedures are sound, we are just aiming to improve the service." The 400-metre-long Ever became grounded diagonally across the southern section of the canal during high winds on March 23rd. It remained stuck for 6 days, preventing hundreds of ships from passing and significantly impacting global trade flows. After it was dislodged, the ship was taken to a lake that separates 2 sections of the canal, where the Suez Canal Authority has been conducting investigations. Osama Raby said data from the ship's recorders had been removed and handed over to an investigation committee, and that the ship would travel on once the procedures were completed. Julie, I guess that story, what it says to me, is more about the interconnectedness of our world, and we've touched on the wish of the proposal to be teaching the future in terms of our climate and our planet. What have you taken away from the events in the Suez Canal, and now the recognition that more may need to be done to restore or to make travel through the Suez Canal, make trade through the canal more resilient?
Well, we were watching it quite avidly, actually, because my husband was born. His father worked in the oil industry, and my husband was born in the Yemen, and John was looking at the whole thing, and he said it's kind of like the world is having a heart attack there, and this artery is occluded, and it needs a stent. So it needs a stent is basically what we were saying, and it looks like it's going to get one, and then obviously it does. I mean, it's unbelievable the size of that ship. I couldn't believe it. But yes, it needs a stent.
That's a very good metaphor. I think if 10% of our blood supply was being blocked, we'd certainly know about it, and so a stent to help the world trade is equally important. It's interesting that the amount of goods that are being it's interesting the size of the vessels that are used to transport the sheer quantity of goods that come from China and the Far East now. I think it was a business in West Lothian who sell pizza ovens. Were saying that most of their supply for the next 2 months was on the Ever Given. And they were wondering what was going to happen. So it shows perhaps that businesses in West Lothian depend on supply from China, which comes through the Suez Canal, and that we owe it to ourselves to make sure that our supply chains are resilient and don't need a stent when there's a problem. But we'll
Definitely.
we'll take that medical metaphor away with us because I think it works very well.
Brilliant.
So it remains for me this evening to say thank you to Julie Coombe for joining us on Scotland at 7. She's taken part in the conversation and has helped me tremendously this evening. And we've had a great discussion around about a range of topics which in the news today, which I think are important to all parts of our community and our society. And so I'm very, very grateful to Julie for her time and for her help this evening.
Thanks for having me.
It's been our absolute pleasure. You'll remember that at Broadcasting Scotland, we rely upon the support of our viewers and of our participants and our volunteers. So if you are able to support Broadcasting Scotland financially, either by subscription or by donation, the website address is on your screen just now. And please go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register, and there you can sign up to make a contribution, however small, to the ongoing operations of Broadcasting Scotland. Broadcasting Scotland also depends upon contributions and input from volunteers and contributors, and so please feel free to join the Facebook group and to follow Broadcasting Scotland online. And if you would like to volunteer to be working in front of the cameras or behind the cameras, or in any of the activities that are required to bring this kind of programme and all the other programmes that Broadcasting Scotland makes, then please, your volunteering and your contribution will be very gratefully received, and you'll have some great fun too. But for the meantime, it's only down to me to say thank you very much for watching us this evening. Thank you again to Julie for contributing. We've been Scotland at 7 on Broadcasting Scotland. Thank you and have a great evening.
What distinguishes Broadcasting Scotland from a website or blog, apart from our brilliant programmes?
Hi there, I'm Gordon Ross.
Are the costs we face to enable us to produce those programmes. These costs are significant and ongoing. However, our facilities are able to do so much more if only we had the staff. In the last year, some of our supporters have cancelled their subscriptions. In one way, we would prefer it if it was because they didn't like us, rather than it being because of the financial pressures which we are all under because of COVID. The really positive outcome of our fundraiser is that at a time of economic challenge in Scotland, we will use your donations to create jobs and in a small way contribute to improving the Scottish economy. If you want us to be Scotland's independent broadcaster, able to provide an alternative mainstream television platform, then please support us.
Scotland is going to be an independent country.
Just imagine what we could do if we had even 1% of the BBC Scotland channel's budget. Imagine. And then please consider turning your imagination into reality. Please support us if you can afford it.